Welcome to Bon Jovi Discussions. Today I have someone who does not need any kind of introduction, but he's going to get one anyway. He is pretty much the best rock photographer you could find. He has photographed some of the coolest bands in the 80s, Van Halen, Metallica, Kiss, Guns N' Roses, Motley Crue, the list goes on. Most importantly, he's photographed Bon Jovi. So today, everyone, I have Mark Weiss. How you doing, Mark?
All right. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming on. How you doing?
I'm doing good. Everything's good. It's safe here in the Jersey Shore. I don't go out much. I take a walk to the beach once in a while, but, kind of stay to my own with my girlfriend and my family, like, everyone should really when they can.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the way to do it right now is, staying safe and staying in. So we're going to get to it, but you have a book that came out last week called The Decade That Rocked, which I think is really cool. And I can't wait till we talk about that. But first, what got you into photography and, how'd you get started?
Well, I got started by mowing someone's lawn and gave me his camera in exchange for mowing his lawn for the season. And that's how I got my first camera when I was 12. Then a few months later, I started developing pictures, taking photos of like my dog and my brother and family events. And I did that for about a year until I kind of got bored of that. And then I started going to concerts in 1974 when I went and saw Elton John, and then Elton John at Madison Square Garden and Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young in Roosevelt Stadium in New Jersey. And I just kind of, started going to concerts. And then I saw a friend of mine, a friend of the family, with this camera around his neck and a couple of really hot looking girls. And I asked him where he was going, and he said, to the stage to take some pictures. And I was like, I just watched him go into the sunset, And a few months later, I went to a family event because his parents were friends with my parents. And when I went over to the house, having a barbecue, he had the pictures hanging up in his room, and we just started talking, and I was just in awe, and I was like, oh, wow, I want to do that. And he kind of told me a couple things, and, sneaking in concerts, and that kind of gave me the bug to want to take it up to the next level.
Wow. That's really cool. And there was one where you got in trouble for taking a photo at a concert, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, what I did was I used to go to the concerts and sell them in my high school locker, my locker. And then people would come to me and, I used to sell them for 50 cents for a 5x7 or $1 for an 8x10. And then I used to sell them in front of the concerts. I took it a step further. And Kiss played, they used to play multiple nights at the Garden in 1977. And I got arrested at one of the shows with all the shirt sellers. So that was that. It's like, all right, well, now what am I going to do? And then I picked up the magazine Circus that I used to read when I was, up to, when I was 12, 13 until then. Looked at the address, went into New York City with my portfolio, and I kind of, knocked on the door, and the art director saw me. He was off deadline. And he told me what to do, and he liked my photography, but come back when you think you have something. And I shot Aerosmith a few months later, and I dropped them off at the office. And they used the first centerfold in Circus magazine, my first picture, 1978. So,
oh, wow.
And then it just snowballed from there.
Did you photograph that picture with Aerosmith's permission or without?
No, that was still when I was sneaking in. So that was a giant stadium. It was like 60,000 people there with Ted Nugent and Mahogany Rush. And there weren't a lot of pictures of Aerosmith. There weren't a lot of photographers in. So I had like good photos where no one else really had them at the time. So it was like a good opportunity to get my first picture published, which worked.
Yeah, that's amazing. So then how did you get involved with all the other 80s hair bands? Because the list goes on. How did you get involved with all these different bands?
Well, it just snowballed from there. It went from, working with Circus with Van Halen, like one of my first concerts that I shot with him, to, Ozzy Osbourne doing photo shoots. So it just kind of snowballed. And whenever there was a door open, I would just kind of go through it and bang it open really, really hard and see where the next the next door would be. So I was just very aggressive, and I wanted to do, wanted to meet people. It was fun. I loved the music, and it just happened very naturally.
I can't imagine what it was like to have like that all access, photographing them behind the stage, on stage, at parties, that must have just been a cool, I mean, the 80s was all about rock and roll and sex and, these wild parties, and you got to see it all. It's pretty cool.
I didn't just see it all. I participated.
Well, besides, we'll get into Bon Jovi here in a second, but what other kind of bands did you really like hanging out with and photographing and all that?
Well, Bon Jovi was great. They were like, they're from Jersey. They were like brothers. We really had a connection when I first met them. But, bands like Motley Crue, in 1982, I did one of their first photo shoots that gave them national attention when they were just, after their first record. Poison when they came out, Guns N' Roses when they came out, Skid Row, all these bands that kind of like defined the 80s. I either grew with them or they were already at some point like Judas Priest. I didn't tour with them like on the bus, but whenever they came to town or in the tri-state area or an event like Live Aid, I would make sure I was there to capture those moments.
Wow. And you mentioned Skid Row, and in the book, you have a picture of Skid Row all in makeup and the big, we call it teased hair.
Yeah.
But if you look at when Skid Row actually kind of started, they kind of went away with that look, and so it was kind of cool to see a photo like that.
Yeah. When I sent the book to Sebastian, he was like shocked because he never even saw it. Like the last time he saw it was when I took it, and when they saw it, they showed their management, and Jon Bon Jovi was involved too, and they all said like, you can't do this. This is not where we're going. And that was the last time they did that, and they decided. Then we did the next shoot was where there were more street, obviously, still a little bit of Hairspray, but not the glam, poisonish, Hanoi Rocks vibe, which
I never got. I was born in '92, so I never got the opportunity to live through the '80s, which I'm always jealous of. But I think towards the '80s, a lot of that glam metal look was gone.
Yeah.
I think a lot of more bands like in the early '90s, like Firehouse and Nelson and all Skid Row, even kind of went away with the whole glam thing.
Well, you're actually living the '80s now, which is good, and I would highly suggest it to all you kids out there.
How's that?
By looking at the book and listening to the music and reading and going on YouTube and seeing what was there, and hopefully it will inspire some musicians that will kind of take the torch and run with it now, because I think that's what we need. We need showmanship out there. We need bands that have that have balls and that want to rock and just like we all did back then. So they are out there, and there is a handful, but we need more.
Yeah. Music today, it's taken such a change compared to the 80s, and it's not the same as it was, like, back in the 80s, you had more starved young people wanting to make a difference in music and wanted to become a big rock and roll band. Nowadays, if you have one hit on YouTube, record company signed you. There's no, what's the word I'm looking for?
Longevity, or there's no
hunger. Yeah.
Well, everything's very like moment. Back in the 80s and 70s, and everyone, they built a following, which they're doing now on YouTube. I mean, a lot of these bands that now on YouTube are starting out with a song here, a song there, and if they're consistent and they keep putting out those tunes, and there's enough where they can put on a live show, and they come to your town, it's like you don't need the record companies to promote you, because you're doing it yourself and you're creating your own following. It's definitely grassroots, but that's really what's happening now. Most of the bands that are playing bigger places, and there is a lot of them, but back then it was almost like a handful, like the chosen few. The record companies might have like 5 or 6 a year that they would put money in, and there was no YouTube, so the radio stations were all together. It was like you put out one song, that's the song you get now, and they all play it. So when they play the country, everyone knows that song. Now it's YouTube. Everyone knows it as soon as you put it out. So it's definitely a different world, and everyone's adapted pretty good about it. And there's a lot of, I think the touring business now, not now, but before the pandemic, was very fruitful for acts from clubs to theaters to arenas to stadiums.
Yeah, I agree with that. And that's a good point. Both systems worked. The 80s worked the way it did, and then today, artists are obviously big and making good money and all that. So, yeah, you got a point.
But there are, to your point, there is more than we need of the one hit kind of wonders that might have 4 million views, and then you don't hear about them. So it's harder to make a rock star today because it's not all uniformed in the country where it's one thing. But you can do it yourself. If you can make yourself a rock star, then you can.
Right. We live in a world now where it's all full of views and likes. That's what we're all focused on. But where I was trying to get out, back in the 80s, you had all these, bands who were trying to make it, and they wrote their own lyrics. They sang their own lyrics, and it was great. And nowadays, a lot of the artists today don't write their own songs. It's written by someone else. And so it's hard for me to listen to an artist that didn't write their own song. And I think that's why I appreciate older music so much more, is because it comes from a place of sincerity. They wrote it, they perform it, and they feel it, and they express that when they're performing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, that's what a rock star really is, that they write it, they wrote it, they lived it. It's in their head. And, I mean, rock stars, even John, and the band, they have outside writers to, add a little bit, which is great. It's collaboration. That's creative collaboration. But yeah, it's a lot of the pop stars. They don't write their own music, and the kids don't even know, but it's just that quick taste that they like. And there's that good, feel good, 4-minute song that they don't care. The kids don't care really.
No, it's just a feel good song, and that's it. So anyway, how did you get involved with Bon Jovi? I see in the book you have a photo of John when he was really, like, I'm thinking like this photo's from like 79 or 80.
Yeah, I'll show you that one right here. This was never shown. This was never released before. So it was John when he was 18.
Wow.
And the way that came about was I was shooting Southside Johnny in the Asbury Jukes at Freehold Raceway, which was like 15 minutes from my house. And Hall & Oates and Willie Nile was also playing. And then I was shooting Southside on the side of the stage. And I'm like, he's drinking a beer. I'm taking pictures of him. And he's like, you should be shooting that kid on stage. And I looked, and I thought he was just trying to get rid of me. So I said, okay, all right, I get it, So I went over and I took pictures, and that was the rest. And I didn't even know that I shot the rest until decades later when I was digging up my old Southside Johnny photos. And I saw in the contacts it said the rest. And I didn't know when I shot who the rest, I didn't get it until I put 2 and 2 together, And I looked at the negatives and I saw John. And I was like, oh my God, it's like getting an old Elvis photo, that no one's ever seen. So I had that probably for about 10 years, and it's been under wraps. And I had a gallery show in New York with a couple other photographers. Actually, David Bergman was there too. And we both had Bon Jovi photos in it. And John came to the gallery, and I showed it to him on the phone, and he looked at it. He's like, oh my God. I said, can you send that to me? I said, no, you can look. And he took my phone and he showed his wife, Dorothea, the photo. And I said, that's going to be in the book for the first time. And I kept it under wraps.
Yeah, it's a cool photo. So did you really get started with John back in 1980 then, or?
Oh no. So that I didn't even know that was in the archives for 20 years. I didn't even know I had that. Fast forward a few years, I was hired by ZZ Top to shoot ZZ Top for some publicity photos at Madison Square Garden. They needed some live photos, and the opening band was Bon Jovi, and they won some contest on one of the radio stations in Long Island. They had the Runaway was on one of their compilation records for homegrown music, and they were the opening band. And I was just getting warmed up, and I took a couple rolls of film, and that was the second time I shot them. And there's a picture of John in 1983 in there as well. And then fast forward 2 more years, 85 after Fahrenheit was out, I was doing some work with Motley Crue on the West Coast, and Doc McGee was managing Motley Crue, and he told me about Bon Jovi. He wanted me to shoot them when I got back to New York, and I did, and they came up to my studio in New York City and did some photos, and one of the photos are in there right on the roof. The Empire State Building's in the background. So that's when we really connected and became friends. And I remember, John was kind of in awe of me because I had all these photos in the rock magazines, and he knew I could help him get them in the magazines. I mean, they were in the magazines already, but he knew that, it would help if I had photos. So I said, one day you're going to, because he said, I can't believe I'm shooting with you, Mark. It's like, one day you're going to tell me to get that camera out of my face. And he did. But yeah, so then from there, then the next year, I did some photos on the road. They played with 38 Special. They used some pictures for publicity, promotional photos, and merchandise photos, posters and things, T-shirts. And then
this one?
It looks familiar. I think it's so many. Yeah, I think it's so many. I don't even know it's mine these days. I gotta really look. But then fast forward another year, Slippery. They wanted me to shoot the Slippery cover. They told me their concept. It's called Wanted at the time, Wanted Dead or Alive, off the song. So they all grew beards, came in one at a time in my studio, and then I put together a Wanted poster, and that was going to be a cover. And then they decided they wanted the band on the cover in regular way they looked, and have the Wanted poster in the background where they're hiding out in some, hideaway, like a gang. So then we went to Vancouver and we did a photo shoot up there in the mountains. That was another shot, and that was supposed to be the cover, until they changed the name to Slippery When Wet, and they had a change of heart on the title and the look, and we decided to do a play off of the strippers from the Number 5 Club over in Vancouver, where we all used to go after they recorded. So they got inspired by that and the road signs that were all over the place, and they put it all together. And we, when they came back to New Jersey after they recorded the album and did what they had to do, we got all the girlfriends together and the friends of the girlfriends, and we got all the cars and the motorcycles, and we went down across the street from the beach where John had a rented apartment, and we did this shoot. And we had this one girl in the middle named Angela with the big breasts, and she, we did that shot. We put her front and center on top, and then after that, we had her come to my studio. I had a blue background. I, made it look like it was outdoors, and had some, waters, wet her down, so everything was nice and see-through-ish kind of. And we cut up her shirt, a little provocative, and we dyed the shirt yellow. In the first shoot, everything was white, so we dyed the shirt yellow, and then we had that, and that was supposed to be the cover. And then the PMRC was going on, and everyone, the record company, got wet feet because of they wanted the album in all the stores, and they were that's when the PMRC, when they were trying to put labels on album covers, and and if they got stickered, chances are it would be in the back of the the back of the racks, or not even distributed through some of these key stores. Okay. So they wanted to come up, they liked the title, but they wanted to come up with a different image. Another image was they had a bar of soap They spent a couple grand on a bar of soap that says "Slippery When Wet." There's a picture in the book on it. It's the first time anyone's ever seen it, and we hired a hand model for $1,000, and she's holding the bars, suggestively, and that was a joke. I mean, I didn't get it. I was just going through the motions on that one, and then that was it until we had a day before to come up with something, or they were gonna it would have missed the deadline for the release date, which they needed that release date. Everyone was set on it, the promotion and all that, and they already printed 500,000 copies of the one with the girl on it. So they had to burn like them. It was released in Japan, who they didn't care, but in the States they burned them. So that's like a collectible. And then Jon just came up. He's like, Mark, I'm coming up. I don't know what we're doing. Just have kind of an idea. Get me a black plastic bag ready for me. I'm like, all right. I had no idea what he was talking about. Put it on the wall, pinned it up, sprayed. I got a water bottle. He says, you have a water bottle? You could spray some water droplets on it. I said, sure. Sprayed it. He wrote "Slippery When Wet" with his finger, and he just left before he even looked at a Polaroid. He's like, just send that to them. That's it. Done.
And it's one of the biggest albums of all time, and that's the cover for it.
Crazy, yeah.
Yeah. It's I like the theory of them all wearing beards, but I don't think that would have worked as an album cover.
Right.
Me speaking as a fan, but this is also come from me as a guy, but I love the idea of the busty woman on the cover.
Yeah.
And I think back then, I think that would have worked. Before the whole label.
Right.
Because that was rock and roll back then. Now in today's standards, probably not, but back then it might have worked. But
it would have worked. It was an eye catcher.
Yeah, exactly. But so then you started to go on tour with them, right? Was the Slippery or New Jersey tour?
Well, Slippery, of course. They needed pictures for for their tour book and for the magazine. So I would go out with them. Every few weeks I would go out for a few days and bring the pictures to show them, to look at them, approve them, take some new ones, and just whenever there was maybe a week or 3 or 4 days, I was available. I would go on their tour. I'd go on their bus, travel with them. When they stepped it up to the plane, I would go on the plane. There's a photo of them in front of the Slippery When Wet plane in the book. And I was just like, an extension of their troops. I would just capture and document moments that we're all, looking at in my book and in other places as well.
So what was it like to hang out with them? I mean, I'm sure they're great guys. I've met a few of them over the years of being a fan. But what was it like to hang out with them and seeing all this behind the scenes stuff with them?
They were just regular guys, because and I felt a little more closer because they were from Jersey, and something about Jersey. It's just the feeling you get, the Jersey Shore, Asbury Park. We all grew up in the same cities, and we all hung out at the same clubs. We didn't necessarily hang out together before they were Bon Jovi, but we all were familiar with the same thing. So we had a lot in common, and they were just, it's just upbringings, middle class, same, I lived maybe 2 towns over where I was brought up with my family. So, just a lot of connections and
similarities. Yeah.
And interest in music. We all loved Thin Lizzy. We all loved the Stones and Led Zeppelin and, all the bands they liked, like most of the bands in the 80s are the bands I liked, from the 70s. And it's just a connection.
And then two photos I want to talk. I don't want to give the whole book away because people need to buy it and look at it because it's just incredible.
Mm-hmm.
But there's 2 photos that I love in the book. The first one is when they were in Russia for the first time,
mm-hmm.
and I think that's the New Jersey tour. What was that like to experience that with them for the first time? Because back then going there was a huge deal.
Yeah, that was a special moment because they were gonna go in 6 months before in the wintertime to go to Russia to check out the Olympic Stadium and meet all these dignitaries over there. And they wanted to document it. They wanted me there. I went there with the band and Doc McGee and a few other people. And we just, we went to the place where the show was going to be, which is, such a contrast of the winter coats and freezing and then to the summer when we arrived. And it ended up being a spread in Rolling Stone magazine. And it was just, it was an honor that they asked me to go with them. And it's something that I'll never forget that experience, especially going back with them, with all those other people that are on the plane. It felt like we were, rock royalty.
Yeah, because you mentioned in the book that you were one of the first ones to step out of the plane before the bands came out. And I couldn't imagine. I mean, I don't know if there was a big crowd of people around the plane when they arrived, or if it was pretty much like a private landing or whatever. But just that feeling of arriving for the first time and having all those people at the show, excited.
Yeah, well, when we arrived, everyone started I was in the back of the plane, and everyone started getting ready to leave, and I'm like, whoa, wait a minute, whoa, let me go out first, because there was local press of the Russian photographers that were going to grab that shot, and it's like I wanted that shot, so I stopped everyone, I went out in front of everyone, and I kind of I was like, okay, let's go, and then they started walking out one at a time, and I wasn't the only photographer, but I was there in the spot, and then after they all came out, I organized the photo shoot with Peter Max, who was the artist who drew the artwork for the posters and on the plane, famous artist in New York City. I posed him in the middle of all of these 40 rock stars up above this one area where they were kind of going into the lounge area. And I organized the photo and grabbed it. And that shot's in there as well. But that was a tough one. I had to do a lot of yelling on that. And I didn't have a megaphone. I usually have a megaphone when it's something, organized and there's a lot of people. But,
A lot of direction for a photo.
Yeah, I pulled it off, though, for sure.
And then one other photo that I really liked was and I'll let you tell the story because I don't want to give too much away, the 1990 Christmas card with Jon Bon Jovi.
Oh, yeah. Well, so John just got married that year or the year before. And I actually photographed in the book. Also, it's a nice photo of Dorothea and John at their house before they went to the party in New York City to, celebrate. Because they got married in Vegas, which I wasn't at. And they wanted to have a party with all their friends and family. So they called me up really I think early that day. It wasn't even planned. They just said, can you come over? And I lived in the same, I lived nearby. And I said, sure. And we took some photos, went in a limo, a helicopter with them and got those shots. And then, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 months later, John just had this idea to do this Christmas card. And I was surprised because he just got married and he wanted me to do this card with all these girls. He said, can you get some girls that, pulling the sleigh and, in sexy clothing and all that. I was like, yeah, I can do that. I've been known to do photos like that here and there and, doing some sexy photos. So I had a bunch of girls, friends I called, and that's how that cover went. And it ended up in a lot of the magazines in Europe and, and he just, I don't know, maybe he wanted to show that he was married, but he was a still wild and crazy guy or something. I don't know. But,
Yeah.
It's out there somewhere,
Yeah. Well, I thought those were cool photos. Before we get going here, I want to talk about two things. I want to talk a little more about the book because it's more than just Bon Jovi. And then I want to talk about your YouTube channel, Wise Guy.
Okay, yeah.
But we'll go to the book. So it's called Decade That Rocked. How did that come about, and why did you decide to release this book now as opposed to the last 30 years?
Right. Yeah. Well, I think it was too soon to release it after it was over. I mean, I could have, but I didn't think I didn't want to do it then, and I didn't do a book on Van Halen or Bon Jovi or Motley Crue. Like a lot of photographers, they do that one book and, they can cash out and make money from an artist, but I wanted my first book to be about my collaborative with a lot of the bands I worked with, and a narrative of how I became who I am, and you know, the important shoots that I've done, and kind of put it in one spot. And you know, I started this book 5 years ago. 7 years ago, it was going to be a different book where I just shot. It was just going to be hair bands, and I didn't want that to be. And that would have been an easy book to do, but I didn't want that to be my first book out there. And then I changed it to be more narrative. And my son told me he was, you know, having a baby, and I wanted to put something together where it kind of, you know, had my legacy, you know, of what I did. So when his son, he's now 4, he gets old enough to read a book, he'll be able to see what his grandfather did, you know. And so it's kind of like, you know, it kind of gave me a reason to really focus on something. You know, I always wanted to do a book, but it was just so like I didn't know where to start, and that just gave me a reason to like really focus and pull it together. And you know, because it's a book of that decade and historic events that happened, and a lot of bands that came out of that are still, most of them are still working and playing arenas and stadiums even, and some are playing clubs still. So everyone's still doing it. It's still in that decade. It's just you know, anywhere from 40 to 60 are very. It's like it's a good demographics for you know, reliving your youth, and especially now. I mean, it's kind of, I'm kind of glad I waited. And it's just something it's a bit of history that I want to share with the world, and hopefully generations to come, they'll see it, get inspired, whether you're a photographer or a band or just interested in the culture back then. And that's why I did it. You know, I really did it. I did it for me. I did it for my family, and I did it for the fans.
Yeah. You know, the book, I don't know if you want to show it, but it's a huge book.
It's right here. Yeah, it's 6 pounds, 1 ounce, 400, almost 400 pages. And we also have, we have 3 gatefolds where it pops open.
Oh, wow.
That's Ozzy in a bunny outfit. You'll have to read that story. It's a good one.
Yeah. But I've looked through the book, and I have mine coming now in the mail. But it's so cool for anyone that's passionate about the 80s hair bands to go through that and look at the pictures and read some insight and stuff. You know, I've been a diehard Bon Jovi fan for 20 years. I had no idea about the 1990 Christmas card. So it was kind of cool to learn some stories about Bon Jovi and other bands.
And just since you're a Bon Jovi, you know, that's your main, would you say that's the band, your site is pretty much about Bon Jovi?
Correct.
Okay, so let's finish it with the last chapter in the book. It's when I did the Blaze of Glory photos when he recorded them with Elton John and Little Richard. So these photos really were never seen before. There's some more. And then he took me to when he did the video, and that photo was of John, was in his, actually it's right in the gold record right behind me, the platinum, inside the little label. And
wow.
This picture of me is a funny story. I don't know if you can see that. Is it a little blurry?
A little bit.
All right. Well, anyway.
I'm sure it gives people a reason to buy the book.
But anyway, it's a picture of me coming out of a tent on the top of this butte, because on that video shoot, Blaze of Glory, they had to bring all the people up in a helicopter because we were like 3,000 feet up. And once you got up there, you had to stay there if you were the crew or me, a photographer, or the video guys. So I camped out. And in the middle of the night, I went to go to the bathroom to take a leak. And I mean, the next day, I came this close to, like, you know, the edge of the butte. You know, it's on that picture, you can see it's like pretty close to the end because it was pitch black. So I almost didn't make it, but you know, I had a good laugh. You know, and I had a couple beers in me too. So it's like, you know, I live to tell the tale.
Yeah, that's really cool. And one last thing about Bon Jovi, and I've always wanted to ask you, did you do the Dry County single cover back in 92, 93? There was rumors that you did. Then another photographer was taking claim. And I just always wondered that if you did that.
Oh, is that when I did this the diner shot? Are you talking about
Crossroads. That's 19.
Crossroads? I did, yeah.
You did Crossroads? Okay, I didn't know
Well,
that.
not I didn't. It wasn't the cover. It was the back cover. It was John in front of a diner.
Right. Yep. That's the roadside diner.
Yeah, they might have used it inside somewhere.
Yeah, I think that's where that came from. That's cool. I had no idea about that. One last thing is your YouTube channel, Wise Guy, which you had just started. Do you want to
it's
that for a second?
Yeah, it's actually the YouTube channel is called The Decade That Rocked, and it pretty much has a lot of interviews from artists talking about me, the decade. It's got fun things like I'll put like this podcast or this video up on there, so it has all my press things. But I also have a new TV series called The Weiss Guy. It's about two guys from the '80s that kind of never grew up, and they are always sneaking around backstage and and they stalk me out and backstage and whatnot. So it's kind of like a fun little cat and mouse kind of thing. And we just launched the first episode. It's only like a short. It's like 12 minutes. The only thing it's missing, because we were just filming the beginning part, we're going to start each episode with like a flashback of me when I was in my 20s and then when they were like 16 and 17. So that's one thing that we're going to add later. But now it's up there. It's 12 minutes. Brian Wheat from Tesla's in it. There's a little special guest, and Chips Enough from Enough's Enough does his hit song "Fly High Michelle." There's so it's going to have special guests from the '80s. So it's just a fun little rock and roll sitcom kind of episodic adventure of sex, drugs, and rock and roll with the Weiss Guy.
Well, I'll be sure to subscribe to it, and I'll check those out, and hopefully everyone that's listening will do the same. But one last time, if anyone's interested, the book is on. You can get the book on Amazon and the decadethatrocked.com.
Yeah, on the Decade That Rocked, like I'll for a little bit more money, I'll send a personalized signature in the book. I have these shirts also there, The Decade That Rocked. You see? And then I have these postcards that I give away if you buy the bundles. So I have rock cards,
Oh, nice.
There's a Bon Jovi one in there too, but just things that people are in the book,
Right.
So little extras, and there's some stickers, little goodies. I like to package it up. I'm always into like the packaging and the branding and stuff. Or you can get it at Amazon for, I think you can get it. I think it's like $5 cheaper, and you get that. You get it from them too.
You're right, but on your website though is actually a really good deal, because the majority of people watching this are Bon Jovi fans. So there's actually a couple Bon Jovi bundles where you get the book, and then you can you can get like 2 8x11 photos signed by you.
Yes.
And so I think that's a cool deal. Especially for Bon Jovi fans.
Yeah. Usually I charge a couple $100 for an 8x11 that I sign, and I put their name on it, up to $3,000. They're fine art prints, but for a limited time in the beginning, if you buy the book and they're available, you get a couple prints.
Cool. Well, I'm definitely gonna order one. So, but I'll let you go here. I really appreciate you coming on today. It was great chatting with you, kind of learning a little more insight about the book, and it was great. I had fun. Thank you.
All right, thanks a lot, brother.
All right, hope you stay safe and take care.
Yeah.